Welcome, viewers, to Bodhi Unified Flow. I'm Dr. Maramutu, your host. Here, we simplify complexity and amplify performance. Today, we're diving into a masterclass explainer on the absolute best practices for the project definition and initiation phase. We're going to be focusing heavily on front-end planning, or FEP, and exactly how you can use the Project Definition Rating Index, the PDR, to accurately assess scope maturity. Look, whether you're building a sleek commercial high-rise or a massive complex industrial processing plant, the data is just undeniably clear. How you start a project fundamentally dictates how you finish it.
And really, that's our core mission for today's session. We're taking these highly complex project initiation frameworks and breaking them down so you can guarantee your execution is a success and maximize that all-important return on investment. Historically, when we look at project failures, those incredibly painful cost overruns, the schedule slippages, missed targets, they can almost always be traced right back to inadequacies in those very first stages of scoping and justification. Well, we're going to change that narrative today. We're taking the initiation phase from just some administrative hurdle and turning it into a powerful, absolutely non-negotiable strategic advantage. All right, let's take a quick look at our agenda for today. We'll start with the power of FEP, then look at measuring maturity with the PDRI. After that, we'll dive into the project execution plan, cover FEP workshops and facilitation, and finally wrap up with a summary and our references. So, what exactly are you going to walk away with today? First, you'll firmly grasp the economic logic and the massive ROI behind front-end planning. You'll learn how to objectively assess your scope maturity using specific PDRI scoring thresholds. You'll also understand the core components of a project execution plan. And finally, you'll master how to get your stakeholders perfectly aligned using structured facilitation workshops. Okay, Section 1, the power of FEP. Now, the initiation and definition phase is this critical window where your ability to influence the final outcome of the project is literally at its highest peak, while the cost of making changes is at its absolute lowest. Just look at the sheer scale of the return here. In industrial applications, extensive research has proven that every single dollar you invest in rigorous, high-quality front-end planning can save you $10 to $20 during the execution phase. Think about that for a second. We aren't just talking about saving pennies. We're talking about massive capital efficiency. By taking the time up front to identify the unknowns, mitigate regulatory hazards, and optimize your procurement before the heavy capital is committed, you're basically buying a heavily discounted insurance policy for your project. If you don't start right, statistically speaking, there is no way you're going to finish right. And that brings us to the actual progression of FEP, which we manage through a stage gate process called front-end loading, or FEL. It builds progressively. So FEL1 takes days, and it's all about the business plan, answering that basic question, is this even worth pursuing? Then we move into FEL2, which takes weeks. That's your conceptual design, where we expand the idea into a facility plan and do some preliminary engineering. Finally, we hit FEL3, taking months. This is the critical front-end engineering design, or the feed stage. Investing adequate time across these pre-feed and feed stages is what gives you a definitive scope and technical baseline. You're building the feed package, which is the absolute bedrock for your final investment decision. Moving right along to Section 2, measuring maturity with PDRI. So we know planning is important, right? But how do we actually know when we've planned enough? We have to move away from those subjective gut feelings about whether a project is ready and move towards hard, objective, risk-weighted data. Enter the Project Definition Rating Index, the PDRI. This is a brilliant, highly calibrated weighted checklist developed by the Construction Industry Institute. It quantifies the exact level of scope definition and maturity before you move into detailed design and construction. It evaluates your project across the basis of project decision, the basis of design, and the execution approach. You basically grade dozens of elements from a level 1, which means complete definition, all the way down to a level 5, which means poor or incomplete definition. That final score? It gives you a hard, mathematical look at your project's true risk profile. Let's look at what the success thresholds actually are based on hundreds of validated projects. If you're doing a large-scale industrial project, your gold standard is a PDRI score below 200. Projects that hit that mark usually perform about 4% below budget. Now, for building projects, which naturally have a different risk profile, a score below 300 is your benchmark for success, keeping you right on track with cost and schedule. And check this out. For smaller industrial projects, hitting below 300 can mean performing 15 to 16% better than average. So the takeaway is crystal clear. Use the PDRI. Get below 200 for industrial, below 300 for buildings. That's your quantitative green light to proceed. All right, Section 3, the Project Execution Plan.
Now we're shifting gears from planning the asset itself to planning the action. It's about taking all that beautifully defined scope and creating a realistic strategic blueprint for how it's actually going to get built in the real world. Think of it this way. If the PDRI measures what is known, the Project Execution Plan, or PEP, details how you're going to execute it. The PEP bounds the systems, the processes, and the people. It absolutely must cover 5 core pillars: your contracting strategy, procurement planning, staffing and organization, which we usually map out with a RASI matrix so everyone knows exactly who is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, along with risk management and communication protocols. All of this has to be locked in during the FEP phase, way before a single shovel hits the dirt. Let's contrast a couple of these elements to see how they perfectly balance each other out to give you total control. On one hand, you've got the hard commercial strategies, contracting and procurement. This is where you decide if you're using EPC, design build, or construction management at risk. It's where you identify those tricky long lead items early so you can secure your supply chain. But on the other hand, you have your operational governance, risk, and communication. This is where you set up formal change control, build out your risk matrices, and establish a single source of truth for your data architecture. So one side secures your commercial boundaries, and the other ensures your team can operate predictably within those boundaries. You simply can't succeed without both.
Moving to Section 4, FEP workshops and facilitation.
Okay, so we've got the data, we've got the plan, but now we have to talk about the human element. Front-end planning isn't just some solitary engineering exercise you do alone in a dark room. You have to get the owner, the operators, and your key stakeholders actively participating if you want to lock in true project value. And to do that without it turning into chaos, we use structured facilitation techniques like value analysis and design charrettes. Value analysis, also known as value engineering, is incredibly systematic. It's all about optimizing the ratio of function to cost, making sure that every single dollar you spend is contributing to a required function. Now, a design charrette is a bit different. It's an intensive, multidisciplinary workshop, usually over 1 to 3 days. It uses a bit of healthy pressure to force people to focus, break down those organizational silos, and rapidly build consensus around a shared vision. So VA drives your financial efficiency, while charrettes drive rapid, aligned design solutions. Just to show you that stakeholder engagement is actually a rigorous engineering discipline and not just some soft skill, let's quickly walk through the 5 steps of a value engineering workshop. Step 1 is orientation, getting everyone aligned on the vision. Step 2 is information, where we gather all the specs and hard costs. Then we hit Step 3, which is really the heart of it, function analysis. We rigorously separate the primary, absolutely essential functions from the secondary ones to strip out unnecessary costs. Step 4 is speculation, where we brainstorm creative alternatives. And finally, Step 5 is evaluation and presentation, filtering the best ideas to get formal approval. Following this structure guarantees that stakeholder input actually enhances the project's value rather than just causing dreaded scope creep.
Section 5, Summary and Key Objectives.
We've covered a tremendous amount of ground in this explainer, taking you from the core philosophy of early planning all the way down to the nuts and bolts of execution and facilitation. Let's do a quick recap to make sure you're fully equipped. First, we validated that incredible economic leverage. Every $1 invested in FEP saves you $10 to $20 during execution. Second, we established objective maturity metrics using the PDRI, setting strict targets of under 200 for industrial and under 300 for buildings. Third, we outlined those 5 non-negotiable pillars of the project execution plan. And fourth, we highlighted exactly how to handle stakeholder engagement using structured tools like value analysis and charrettes. You now possess the fundamental frameworks for ultimate project initiation success. I want to leave you with a provocative thought here. Think about your own current projects for a second. If we know, mathematically and empirically, that the absolute highest leverage point of any project is its initiation phase, is your organization truly investing enough time, capital, and intellectual rigor into the foundation before you start building the asset? Or are you rushing to execution just to check a box, only to pay for it tenfold later in delays and overruns? The data is crystal clear. The choice of how you proceed is entirely yours. And finally, Section 6, References. Everything we've discussed today isn't just opinion. It's backed by decades of intense research and industry validation. We drew heavily on the authoritative bedrock of the Construction Industry Institute, specifically their best practices and PDRI guidelines. We also cited the PMI PMBOK Guide, AAC International Recommended Practices, the HM Treasury Green Book, the REBA Plan of Work, and excellent frameworks from the IGBC and LCI. I highly encourage you to dive into these resources. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Mary Muthu, on Bodhi Unified Flow. So ask yourself today, are you truly investing in your foundation or just rushing to pay for it later? Until next time, keep simplifying complexity and amplifying your performance.